Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis, coaching carousel. Here in the North, we're going to talk about 30 coaching changes, Landis, that have happened with our 26 Northern college football teams. And these are the 30. 6 head coaches, 13 new offensive coordinators, 11 new defensive coordinators. Now, 6 of the coordinators on each side are like the new coordinators for the new head coach. But that's also like a pretty good number of new OCs and DCs that aren't related to head coaching changes. Does 30 overall, right? The 3 most important spots, the boss and then the guys in charge of the 2 sides. So there's, let's do this math real quick. 26 times 3. You doing this in your head? Do I need a calculator? Can you do 78?
100, yeah, 78. Yeah, 78.
78. We have 30 of 78 have changed. That's kind of a lot. That's more than a third. Does that feel like a lot, or does that feel like, hey man, this is coaching these days? Of course, there's going to be a lot of changes.
It feels like a lot, but I guess when you factor in the 6 head coaching changes and the kind of domino effect of that, it's probably not quite as drastic or severe as it seems. But yeah, I mean, a third of our coaches, almost half. We're not that far from getting halfway to all of our coaches or all of our head coaches and coordinators being swapped out. Does feel like quite a lot, but I will say, like, going through it, some good moves in there. I like them.
I mean, I think there's a lot of optimism. And that's what I want to talk about. Like there's moves that you make that are like sort of desperate, the last thing before the whole program goes down kind of moves. There's proactive moves when you're like, we're okay, but we need to get better. I feel like there's more proactive than reactive. I feel like there's a decent mix of some up and coming young coaches, both as head coaches and coordinators that are getting opportunities, and some good veteran hires where I feel like there's a lot of things that like sort of match up. Just like, for example, it's like Pat Narduzzi as an older head coach hired a young up and coming offensive coordinator, even though it wasn't his instinct necessarily at Pitt, right? So there's that kind of move. Meanwhile, at Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman as a young head coach hired a veteran offensive coordinator that he had worked with before to kind of elevate that offensive profile for the Fighting Irish. So there's things like that where it's like, hey, I can see the plan here of why you made this move and picked this guy.
Yeah, it's not like nothing seems to have been early. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Like, not every hire is a home run, but it does seem like a lot of these were pretty well thought out. Like the fit just feels right. The fit at the time, I think, feels right for a lot of these. And also, like, to use the Pitt example again, it's like someone need to like pull Pat Narduzzi into 2024 with his offense, right? And like he seems like he got a coordinator who might do that. I think someone needed to pull Marcus Freeman in a direction of being a little more creative and explosive, right? And he found somebody who did that. So I think that there were a lot of coaches maybe who kind of checked their impulses to be, whether that's conservative or vice versa, and hired someone that I think is going to work out really well for what they need.
So we're going to start with the head coaches. And again, that is 26 Northern teams that we claim here as the Power Conference Northern teams. And 6 of them have new head coaches. And the 6 are Bill O'Brien at Boston College. We are going to delve into that because we have not talked about that in detail yet. That is the new hire at Boston College. Curt Cignetti at Indiana. Sherrone Moore, promoted at Michigan to replace Jim Harbaugh. Jonathan Smith has been in for a while now at Michigan State, taken over after Mel Tucker's career fell apart last year. Syracuse hired Fran Brown after getting rid of Dino Babers, and Washington makes the national title game, loses Kalen DeBoer to Alabama, and hires Arizona head coach Jedd Fisch. So I want to talk about all these moves because the one thing I think that I can see, I was thinking about it as a movie pitch, Landis. Like if the hire, it's like, what's your pitch on the hire? Like, give me the elevator pitch, the synopsis of this hire. And I feel like all 6 of these have an elevator pitch that I like, that at least has a plan behind it. And we'll start with Washington. And they have been pitching this on social media. They have been calling themselves the 33rd NFL team because Jedd Fisch, who has a decent amount of NFL experience, hired Brennan Carroll who was his offensive coordinator at Arizona. He came with him to Washington. He's Pete Carroll's kid. And then he hired Steve Belichick, who's Bill Belichick's kid, as the defensive coordinator. They are leaning into that. Ryan Grubb, could get confusing. Ryan Grubb, who had been the Washington offensive coordinator with Kalen DeBoer, who maybe some people thought should become the new head coach, didn't get that, went to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer, but now already left because he's coming back to be the Seahawks offensive coordinator, where Mike McDonald is now the head coach there, taking over for Pete Carroll, who got fired, but Pete Carroll's... Anyway, it feels like the Seahawks and the Huskies can all hang out together. There's some crossover there. They're leaning into this. Jedd Fisch was able to keep some of the initial players from Washington who are like, I'm going in the portal. He had a meeting and he kept some guys, but like this, I don't know. Hire guys with NFL ties, with NFL experience. I imagine Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll are going to be hanging around.
Yeah.
Neither of them have jobs. That'll be a thing. It feels like Jedd Fisch has some energy. Like, they've built a little bit of an identity here with the way they're going about their business.
Yeah, I think they have, and it's not. I don't know that it's one. This was not necessarily a move I thought Washington was going to make. I just thought they were going to hire Ryan Grubb, go with the continuity, kind of not try to fix a thing that isn't necessarily broken, and just kind of carry forward with that offensive identity they had with Kalen DeBoer. It was really good for them last year, but like the more we're removed from them not doing that, and the more time I've kind of had to digest this hire of Jedd Fisch, like I think everything you're saying is right. It does feel like they've been able to cultivate a little bit of an identity here in a rather short period of time. And like Jedd Fisch, I don't know. I think he's a pretty good coach, right? He built Arizona up rather quickly. I think they had 1 win his first year, and they had 10 wins last year, 8 wins last year.
Yeah, great year.
Like there was a clear trajectory there that Arizona was on. To the point where like Arizona became a little bit of a darling last year. And I think people were thinking of them as a little bit of a dark horse coming into this year.
Yeah.
And now Jedd Fisch kind of gets to take that energy up to Washington. It's a tough job. Like there's a little bit of a rebuild that has to happen there. It's different recruiting territory, but I really do think like the NFL pedigree, both with Jedd Fisch and the guys he's hiring and the people that are sort of tangentially related to the program now, is going to be a really compelling sales pitch for what Washington's trying to do.
All right, Syracuse. Fran Brown has been in for a while. He's 41 years old. He's coming from Georgia, where he was a position coach, but he has deep New Jersey ties. He's brought in some guys who, and we'll talk about some of them later, who kind of were working in the South but have Northern roots. He's, again, 41 years old, jumping into a head coaching job. I love the hire. I love that idea of let's get somebody who had been at the most successful program in college football with the Georgia Bulldogs, and like the pitch of Fran Brown, up and comer. Let's get him before somebody else gets him. And he has all these Jersey connections he's going to work. I love the pitch. And I think there's a lot to be optimistic about with Syracuse.
Yeah, again, like when this hire was made, we talked about it, like I like recruiter was not necessarily the profile of the person I thought they would go after, nor was it the one that I really thought they should. But it has paid early dividends, right? They're recruiting better. I think this recruiting class is like the best they've had in like 10 years. It's not a top 10 recruiting class, but by Syracuse standards, it's very good. They're doing good work in the portal, and I think that will continue for Fran Brown. The thing that's interesting here is like you're hiring a first-time head coach. And like the top of the brain trust here is like all guys taking on a lot of responsibility for the first time, which I not to say they can't handle it, but it's an interesting spot for a Syracuse program to be in. But clearly a hire that's infused a lot of energy into the program already.
Love it. Michigan State, Jonathan Smith. This guy had just won. He just was winning at Oregon State. And again, as we talked about, if he had not taken the Michigan State job, he would have been a very strong candidate at Washington, where he'd been the offensive coordinator before he went to Oregon State. And now people think he may have been a very strong candidate at UCLA. He's from there. He's from Southern California, played high school football there. They just hired Deshaun Foster, which was a good hire there, a guy who'd played and had worked at UCLA. But he winds up at Michigan State, where he doesn't have roots. He doesn't have geographic connections, but it feels like good football coach hire, bring in Aiden Childs as the quarterback. This was sort of like get one of the best, most experienced head coaches available who wanted to make a step up to a place with just more opportunity to win than what was happening at Oregon State. we've talked about it before, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves that this just feels like a good football hire for the Spartans.
Yeah, it does, and I think like your point about him not having really any kind of ties there is well made, and I think that's important, or can be important. I tend to look at like, how do you want to play, how do you want to recruit, how do you want to build your roster, and then does that kind of mesh with where you're going? And I think it does here. Like I think the way that we've seen Oregon State play the last couple of years, you can kind of pick that up and put it in the Big Ten, frankly, and I think that'd be really successful. So I assume that's the plan for Jonathan Smith moving forward. I think you can recruit at a higher level and get in more doors at Michigan State than you can at Oregon State. So I love the fit here. I think it's going to be, when we look back at this cycle, it's going to be one of the better hires we saw.
Sherrone Moore promoted at Michigan to replace Jim Harbaugh, 37 years old, did a fantastic job as the offensive line coach, as the offensive coordinator, as the fill-in head coach while Jim Harbaugh was suspended this year. We did go through this. Maybe there are other hires you could have made outside that were splashier, but if the pitch is continue what has worked at Michigan, that's a compelling pitch. And so we'll talk a little bit more, like the two coordinator hires, offense and defense, are interesting. I think what Sherrone Moore did, we'll do that in a second. One thing that I think has not worked out yet is whether he will continue to call plays. He has said that remains up in the air. That's a big decision for him. What would you suggest as his consigliere if he said, "Hey, Bill, should I call plays or not?"
I would probably say no, right? I just don't think that that's a long-term recipe for success. But I also would understand, like, at a time when you made this move for continuity and then it kind of blew up in your face, you could at least maintain that piece of the continuity with Sherrone Moore calling plays and the familiarity with the younger players in Michigan's offense who have to step up now. So I could see that being the reason why he does it. But I would say long-term, he should probably give it up to somebody who can handle it.
I think it would make sense for him to keep it this year. And we'll talk more with the offensive coordinator hire, sort of groom the next guy to take over. But I think it makes sense. And again, the reasoning behind this, when you say it blew up in their face, are you just talking about like that they lost Jesse Minter, they lost Mike Elston, two big time defensive coaches?
They lost their strength coach. Yeah, they kept the roster together, which is like it's not a small thing. But I also don't. I think keeping your roster together for 1 year should not be the reason why you promote a head coach. It just feels like a little, I don't know. It feels like shaky ground.
So if you were going to lose the strength coach that people give so much credit to, and you're losing the defensive coordinator, if you knew that, would you not have hired Sherrone Moore?
I would not. I would have expanded the net and see who I could have gotten, and then maybe that still leads you back to Sherrone Moore. But they didn't do that. They just kind of promoted the guy that was right in front of their face, who like had a compelling case for it. I'm not saying they necessarily shouldn't have done that, but if you were going to tell me that he wasn't really going to be able to maintain much of any of the infrastructure that Jim Harbaugh had set in place, partly because Jim Harbaugh took a bunch of it with him, I would have opened it up more to see what shook out from there.
Interesting. I'm not surprised that these guys went with Harbaugh, though. Like, are you? I think the continuity is, well,
I'm not surprised that Jesse Minter went with Harbaugh. I'm surprised that. I'm surprised the exodus has been larger than I anticipated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ben Herbert, the strength coach, you're surprised he went?
Yeah, because I don't like strength coaches in college and the NFL, like don't do a whole lot.
Yeah. Strength coaches in college are like the head coach of the program in the summer.
Yeah.
Like it is a huge deal. It is interesting. Like there's going to be a lot of comparisons, rightfully so, between Sherrone Moore taking over at Michigan and Ryan Day and what he did when he took over at Ohio State. But like the Urban Meyer infrastructure remained at Ohio State, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the ops guys stayed, the recruiting guru stayed, the strength coach stayed. And then when Urban Meyer took the job in Jacksonville, like those guys didn't go with him, and he did not raid the Ohio State coaching staff to go take guys to the NFL. So I don't know. Does that mean that Urban Meyer was just nicer to his former employer than Jim Harbaugh was? Or does that mean that nobody wanted to go with Urban Meyer and everybody wants to go with Jim Harbaugh? Is that more of a positive or a negative? Which way is it?
I think it's a combination of everyone wanting to go with Jim Harbaugh as opposed to not wanting to go with Urban Meyer. But I don't know. In my opinion, too, it raises some questions about like what they're expecting from the NCAA. If like everyone, it kind of feels like people are kind of jumping off the ship here. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I still completely get it though, right? Like the pitch of like, we just won the national title. We're 15-0. Sherrone Moore was an integral part of everything we did. He's going to continue the culture and the vibe, even if the pieces are changing. The who Michigan is, Sherrone Moore can continue that, as well as that, the best that anybody else could have. I get it.
Yeah, I get that too.
Indiana, Curt Cignetti. This is just hiring a guy who knows how to win. And it's been a pretty quick rise, right? From what is it? Indiana, Pennsylvania to Elon to James Madison, now to Indiana. The guy's just a winner. And for Indiana to say, we're going to hire a guy who's won at lower levels quickly, and now we think he's going to come win at Indiana, absolutely get the pitch.
Yep, I do too. He's made them a little bit more relevant already, I think. Like, they're involved in some recruitments that Indiana is not really ever involved in. Like, is it Julian Lewis, the top quarterback in I think he's in 2025 now. He was in 2026. Like, walking around wearing an Indiana towel. And like, at some programs, I don't think that means a whole lot. I think it means a lot for a place like Indiana. So that Curt Cignetti has at least the program on the minds of players like that as he starts to build this thing, I think is noteworthy.
Yeah. 119-35 as a head coach at 3 different stops between 2011 and 2023. Pretty good. And again, it's like it's a clear strategy, and it's just the thing of like, you can see he's 62 years old, right? Fran Brown at Syracuse is 41 years old. Opposite ends of the spectrum on these kind of hires, but like really strong, I think, opposite ends, right?
Yeah,
we're going to go this way, we're going to go that way, and I think you could have flipped them, right? I mean, Fran Brown, has the Jersey ties, a little more East Coast. Maybe he makes more sense at Syracuse than he would have in Indiana. But also, if you just flipped them, I think there's a chance that it works the same way too. It's just sort of like how you choose to go about it.
Yeah, well, just like flip the profile, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be Fran Brown, but like young, energetic assistant coach who seems ready for a step up, bring him to Indiana, has a lot of juice, and then a guy who has won at a couple different levels with a bunch of different styles and different types of players at Syracuse. Like, yeah, that would be compelling too.
Okay, last guy is Bill O'Brien, and this is one we want to delve into. I have a theory here, perhaps. So I'll ask you, this is the beginning of the theory. Can Bill O'Brien be Boston College's Greg Schiano?
Yeah, like Boston Pride kind of thing.
Well, and here's the thing that I'm intrigued by, and I was like, let me see if I can find examples of this. And I was like, here's 50 examples of it. This is the profile I'm thinking of. It's somebody who has been successful out in the world of coaching. And I mean, Bill O'Brien was an NFL head coach who made the playoffs. I mean, that's incredibly successful. Greg Schiano never reached those heights in the NFL, but he was an NFL head coach. Had been a coordinator at high profile places. But then you sort of hit this age, and I'm like in your 50s, where you went out and took your shot, you had success, but maybe it turns out you're not going to be the head coach of the Super Bowl champs, or you're not going to be the head coach at Alabama or Texas or whatever. That's not going to be what the final chapter of your career is. But you've taken your shot. And now in your 50s, you are willing and able and ready to find a place where you can be in charge, have power, do your thing, build it your way. But maybe you're not doing that to try to get to somewhere else. Maybe you're ready for this to be your final chapter. Your place that it's comfortable. The stakes aren't quite as high as some of the other places you've been. I mean, Bill O'Brien's been at Alabama and the New England Patriots. Like, that's as high as the stakes get. He took over at Penn State when the program was on fire. Right? I mean, the Houston Texans, right? I mean, so this isn't that. It's more comfortable. And you have roots there, right? He's from New England. He's from the Boston area. His family has connections there. And you can settle in for the medium long term. Like, maybe it's your last job. And like, can this work? And here are the examples. I did 2 minutes of research on this. So Bill O'Brien settling into this, maybe he's 54 years old. I think he fits this profile. Greg Schiano at Rutgers right now, he's 57 years old. And he has that profile. He's a Jersey guy, just like Bill O'Brien's a New England guy. Mike Locksley at Maryland, right? Mike Locksley went out. He had been at Alabama. He was the head coach at New Mexico. He had been other places. He worked at Florida, but he's from DC. This is kind of the job I think he always wanted. He's in his 50s and he might be there for the long haul. Pat Narduzzi, he's 57. He's been at Pitt now for coming up on a decade, but like this is like, does Pat Narduzzi want to go be the head coach at Alabama? Like, I think he could be here for the long term. And so when you think about guys like this, I think it can be really good for programs like this, because to have like the up and we just said like the Fran Brown hire is great, but honestly, if Fran Brown really hits at Syracuse and is great, he's going to be the head coach at Tennessee in like 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. The SEC is going to come steal him back, or Penn State's going to take him when James Franklin, like somebody's going to take him because he's still on the ascending part of his journey. To me, it's not these programs settling. It's not Pitt and Maryland and Rutgers settling. It's getting a really good, experienced coach who's been around the block, who has ties to the area, ties to the program, who will be happy there. What do you think of that profile of a head coach? Is it something schools like this should pursue? Is it something that you kind of stumble into? Are you, if you aren't chasing the next up and comer, maybe we would get, Nick Saban for a couple years before he leaves. I don't know. Do you want somebody who's trying to get somewhere else, or do you want somebody who's happy to be long-term at your place?
If I'm Boston College, I think I want somebody who's happy to be in Chestnut Hill long-term, right? I don't want to be on that hamster wheel constantly, like trying to find the next up and coming guy. Hope you get a good 2 or 3 years out of him. Maybe you spike and you win 10 games and I don't know, go to a New Year's Six Bowl. I guess it's an interesting question. Like what, because I think a lot of it's financial, right? Like what is better for a program? Is it like to have a guy who's happy to be where you are, is going to have a floor of like bowl eligibility every year, but maybe never quite get you to greater heights, or a guy who might spike and get you to a New Year's Six Bowl 1 year out of a decade. Like I don't, from an athletic director, I don't know what I'd rather have. Like if I'm a fan of Boston College, I think I'd rather have the guy who's got some staying power and can build something there that you can kind of grab onto for a number of years and come to expect like a base level of competency, even if it's not, ever really coming close to flirting with an ACC championship or anything like that. I don't think those are the expectations at a place like Boston College. So I would rather have a guy who I know is going to be there and accountable, and you kind of know what to expect, rather than like have these ebbs and flows throughout your program where you run the risk, I think, of really bottoming out. No one wants to do that. So I think you're right in wanting that profile. I'm somewhat skeptical that Bill O'Brien is that. Because
why?
Part of it is like,
why? Because you don't think he would succeed?
Because 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago he was Ohio State's offensive coordinator and then left. Like I think he still might be.
This job where he has geographic and family roots wasn't available.
I think he still might be in climber mode.
Okay.
Even at, what'd you say, he's 54?
Yeah.
It would be an interesting conversation with coaches, like at what age do you kind of get out of that? Like between 50 and 60 kind of sounds about right. But when you've been an NFL head coach, when you've been a successful college head coach and was only for 2 years at Penn State, maybe you think of yourself in a different light. And it's not like, I don't think Boston College is necessarily a springboard to go be an NFL head coach again. But if he has 2 good years, relatively good years as Boston College's head coach, and I don't know, the New York Giants say, do you want to come be our offensive coordinator? Does he go do that because he thinks he might have another shot at to be an NFL head coach if he does so? Like, I don't know. I don't know that I see a 1-to-1 comparison with Greg Schiano and Bill O'Brien.
It's hard. I just think it can be hard at programs like this, where sometimes it feels like when you hire somebody, the only 2 options are it's not going to really work out and they're going to get fired, or if they're really good, they're going to get a better job.
Mm-hmm.
And that existence, that constant existence, I think it can help you maybe love your program. Like, hey, that's my guy. You know, like if there's continuity, like you know who you are. And it's one of those things. Although I do think, right, I guess Pitt fans were frustrated with Pat Narduzzi going 3-9, even though Pat Narduzzi has been there for 9 years now and is 65-50. And this was only his second losing year out of 9 at Pitt. And actually, like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, Pat Narduzzi, when the Bama job came open, they didn't come talk to Pat Narduzzi. He's not that good. You're not in danger of losing him to that. But he also went 11-3 2 years ago, right? Like that to me is practically the perfect situation for Pitt. But yet I do think as soon as you go 3-9, people are frustrated and maybe wondering, should we go get somebody with maybe more upside? I don't know. I don't think it's settling. I don't think what I'm explaining is settling.
No,
but
I don't think so either.
I think it's comfort and satisfaction, right? And that it's at some point in life, I think you're happy where you are and you're not trying to get to the next place, especially if you've been to those places. So I'm not telling Bill O'Brien how to live his life. I think this has a chance to be pretty darn good for both the coach and the place.
Yeah, no, I think it does too. I don't know. I guess I'm a little cynical when it comes to that ideology. Like, I thought that about Jim Knowles when Jim Knowles came to be Ohio State's defensive coordinator, and then like he interviewed for the Duke head coaching job. You know what I mean? It's like I never want to say that like, oh, this guy's locked in, because you never know what's going to pop up. And I guess like, what are the things that could pop up that would like really pull Bill O'Brien away from Boston College? It's like I don't know that any other schools are really itching to hire Bill O'Brien as head coach in college football. And like, he was just with the Patriots, so like the Patriots aren't going to come back and try to bring him back to the NFL. So maybe in that sense there should be some comfort that he has some staying power at Boston College.
All right, those are our 6 new head coaches in the North. When we come back, we're going to talk just for a little bit about dog mentality. And then we're going to dive into the offensive coordinators first. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Thanks, of course, to all you guys joining us here on Kings of the North. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, KOTNCFB. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell a friend, tell a stranger. Was that a good marketing plan? Like you're in line at Starbucks and you tap the person in front of you on the shoulder and say, do you watch Kings of the North? We would take that, right?
Yeah, I would take. Just be careful. You know, there's some crazy people out there.
Are you interested in a Dunn Kings relationship at all? If we tried to get Ben Affleck and/or Matt Damon and Tom Brady as the Dunn Kings on the show, because they are Northern Kings, which is also what we are.
I am very much in favor of that. I'm a proponent of Dunkin' Donuts and its offerings. And I like Matt Damon and I like Ben Affleck, so I'm all about it.
Oh, but you don't like Tom Brady. That was conspicuous that you left him out.
Yeah, he'd be third.
He'd be third.
If I were ranking him, he'd be third. Yeah.
Do you want us to shoot a rap crew promo for Kings of the North?
Do I have to be a part of it?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I'm definitely happy to be the Affleck and be at the front. You could be the Tom Brady on the turntable.
Yeah, I could do the Damon role too
on the side. Yeah,
I'm just not doing the Affleck role. Yeah.
Well, Michael be on the turntable. Like he's a Tom Brady. So we do want to talk about. We were on a trip together in Georgia, and I was going to buy this hat, and I didn't buy it, and I have to order it now. But I am going to buy a Georgia Bulldogs hat as we get more and more and start leaning more into our dog mentality segment. So pretend I'm putting on a flat-brimmed Georgia Bulldogs trucker hat, and we will now start our dog mentality segment, which is the SEC from the official SEC Twitter account tweeting after the Super Bowl that McCole Hardman caught like a 4-yard touchdown pass to win the Super Bowl. Need 6 on a big stage. You know who to call. Phone emoji. Georgia football, Super Bowl 58. McCole Hardman, big stage TD catch. Thirsty. So thirsty. Because who was more chill about all this? The Big 12 that had Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy. And Cincinnati's now in the Big 12, and Travis Kelce. Like, the SEC did practically nothing that mattered in the Super Bowl. They were like, boom, 4-yard touchdown catch that literally a mannequin would have caught. I'm not here to criticize McCole Hardman, but for the SEC to be like, yeah, Super Bowl, when you need a big catch. Are you kidding me? Andy Reid, by the way, the guy who drew up the play, went to BYU, Northern School. What are we doing? This is desperation. This is extreme thirst by the SEC to be relevant, so of course I retweeted it and said, unlike the college football playoff, in the Super Bowl, an SEC receiver caught a touchdown because Alabama only scored 2 touchdowns in the college football playoff. They both were rushing touchdowns. They didn't have a receiver catch a touchdown. Didn't it seem thirsty? I thought it was like, come on, what are we doing?
It was pretty thirsty. It seemed, a little desperate for attention there. SEC. I forgot McCole Hardman was on the Chiefs until that point.
Exactly. He had 180 receiving yards the whole year. He went to the Jets. The Jets didn't want him. The Chiefs were like, I guess we'll do. Like, dog mentality. 100. You know how many touchdown catches he had this entire season, regular season, postseason? 1. That was his only touchdown of the whole year. Dog mentality. Saving the best for last. Dog mentality. My God. I mean, there were some other SEC players like Juwan Jennings who caught the touchdown and threw the touchdown. Yeah. He was like a quarterback recruit at Tennessee. That. They could have done that. Chris Jones is from Mississippi State. Deebo Samuel went to South Carolina. I'm not here to name SEC players in the Super Bowl, but desperate dog mentality. Come on, man.
Desperate. I like thirsty is the perfect way to describe it. Yeah.
And like the team that built, it's reinvented itself as like the Georgia Bulldogs of the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles, collapsed this season in absolute disarray.
You have to bring that up.
But right, isn't it like the Eagles are
it's true.
All the Georgia Bulldogs, and then they ate themselves. They consumed themselves. Like, it was horrible. Dog mentality, like too many dogs. Too many dogs. They're pooping all over the house. Oh my God. Like one dog. Okay, maybe one dog. Like 6 dogs. It's like
too many.
Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith and like it's
Khalil Ringo. Yeah.
It's crazy.
DeAndre Swift. Yeah. There's
just
it's too many dogs. The house smells. The house smells when you have that many dogs.
Dog mentality. Just relax, SEC. It wasn't your time. It wasn't your year. Okay? So just chill. Just step back. It's fine. You've had lots of times where it has been your time, but you don't have to shove yourself onto the stage, right? It's fine.
That's right.
Trent McDuffie, like the dying Pac-12 account wasn't like Trent McDuffie. They should have been.
Yeah, he was the best player in the game.
He was the best player in the game. Washington cornerback knocking down touchdown passes for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like that would have been worthy or something. Desperate Georgia. That's like for real. They don't like it. They don't like being out of the spotlight.
They do not.
They're desperate. All right, let's talk about offensive coordinators. 13 new offensive coordinators in the North this year. Again, 6 of them created by new head coaches being hired, right? So like, okay. But that's still 7 other offensive coordinator changes. So let's run through. We have Will Lawing hired as the new offensive coordinator at Boston College. It may not be 100% official as we speak here, Landis, but he has a connection to Bill O'Brien. Is that right?
Yeah, he was a GA at Penn State when O'Brien was the head coach there, and then followed him to Houston and to Alabama and to the Patriots and now to Boston College.
Okay. So Colorado, Pat Shurmur, I listed this. Pat Shurmur took over as the play caller for Sean Lewis late last season, but keeping him and retaining him as like, okay, you're going to be the offensive coordinator now full time, I thought was worth putting on this list. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Indiana, Mike Shanahan has been with Curt Cignetti at every stop along the way. And we need to state this for the record. What is the situation with Indiana offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan?
He is not related to the NFL Shanahans.
Okay.
He's not Mike Shanahan Jr.
He is not Mike Shanahan. And he's also not Mike Shanahan. He's not former Super Bowl winning coach Mike Shanahan. He's just a guy. No, well, he's a very good coach. Okay. Iowa, Tim Lester, former Western Michigan head coach, hired to take over from Brian Ferentz. Michigan promotes Kirk Campbell internally as the new offensive coordinator for the Wolverines. Michigan State, it's Brian Lindgren. Northwestern goes out and hires Zach Lujan from South Dakota State. Notre Dame, Mike Denbrock comes up from LSU. Ohio State hires Chip Kelly, the UCLA head coach, gives up being the boss to come be the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. Andy Kotelnicki comes from Kansas to be the new offensive coordinator at Penn State. Cade Bell, we talked about Pat Narduzzi hiring a young guy, 31 years old. Cade Bell, the new offensive coordinator at Pitt. Syracuse, the hire there is Jeff Nixon, and then Brennan Carroll at Washington, as we mentioned, new offensive coordinator coming from Arizona with Jedd Fisch, the son of Pete Carroll. So there's a couple guys here, Bill, that I do want to zoom in on a little bit. And let's start with Mike Shanahan at Indiana. This hire, this certainly fits sort of like the young guy, right? I mean, he's in his early 30s, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an interesting road. We like these guys with Northern roots. So he played at Pitt, and then he has been with Curt Cignetti. He was first got with him at Indiana, Pennsylvania, then at Elon, then James Madison. He's been the offensive coordinator at James Madison the last 3 years. There was some speculation and this is where it gets confused. It's all very tied together. Pitt changed offensive coordinators. Pitt's offensive coordinator the last couple seasons was Frank Cignetti Jr., who was Curt Cignetti's brother. They are the sons of Frank Cignetti Sr., who's the former head coach at West Virginia and then Indiana, Pennsylvania. So to replace Frank Cignetti Jr. as offensive coordinator, some people thought Mike Shanahan, protege of Curt Cignetti, might be a good hire for Pitt. He was a Pitt receiver. Instead, he follows Curt Cignetti to Indiana. This is a young guy. There's a long connection here with the head coach. It feels like they've run some pretty like modern but physical offenses. And it feels like Mike Shanahan in Indiana is sort of an offensive coordinator on the rise.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably would have been a Power 5 coordinator this year, no matter what. Like if Curt Cignetti had decided to stay at James Madison for whatever reason, maybe Mike Shanahan would have been hired by somebody Pitt or somebody else. I think he was probably on the short list of hottest offensive coordinators that would have been available this offseason, which frankly makes it a really good job of Curt Cignetti for keeping him and bringing him with him to Indiana. And obviously the personal connections help there. And I'm not sure financially what Indiana decided to pony up to kind of keep that brain trust intact there, but it's been a very good one at James Madison. I've said this before because Curt Cignetti brought it up when he was introduced. Very good offenses at James Madison, 3 straight conference players of the year at quarterback, all 3 very different players. And they got the best out of them while they were at James Madison. And I think there's reason to be optimistic about them finding ways to do the same in Indiana.
And coming from a place where Indiana's offense was a mess last year and fired the offensive coordinator in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Stability.
Like a big, how would you, the jump up in terms of offensive acumen, calling plays at Indiana is...
It's huge. Yeah. Okay. And it's a combination of Shanahan and Cignetti. Like they kind of do it together, but it does seem like Curt Cignetti empowers Mike Shanahan to run the thing. But they're both offensive minded guys, but yeah, it's night and day compared to what Indiana has had previously.
All right, let's talk about Iowa. Let's talk about Tim Lester being hired at Iowa to replace Brian Ferentz. Maybe not received with a lot of enthusiasm by Iowa fans. This is one of those where they kind of were throwing out names. Ryan Grubb, because he has Iowa roots, was like stuff getting thrown out there. It's like, oh my gosh. And it just was never going to happen. I did find a headline. I saw a headline on the Google machine that was, did Kirk Ferentz hire Tim Lester out of spite? Like to sort of stick it to Iowa of like, oh, you don't want my kid? Here, take this guy. I will say this. I think this hire is better than that.
I agree.
And Tim Lester, he in the last decade was the Syracuse quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. He was the quarterbacks coach at Purdue. Then he was the head coach at Western Michigan, went 37-32 there, got fired, spent this year with the Packers. But in running through the offenses at Western Michigan while he was there, again, by these FEI ratings that I always cite, in 2020, Western Michigan had the 5th best offense in the country in FBS. In 2021, they were 39th. In 2021, Western Michigan's offense was 39th. Iowa's was 92nd. Okay. So like they had a bad year his last year, but they hit a peak there. Sky Moore was a 1,200-yard receiver, draft pick of the Chiefs. They had like a quarterback that was pretty good. Like he was the head coach kind of running the show offensively, and they were pretty decent. In 2021, they were 3rd in the MAC, 32.5 points per game. They averaged 468 yards per game, which was 2nd in the MAC. He's run some good MAC offenses, and I think it is a significant step up from Brian Ferentz.
I think so too. I think it actually is a nice balance of continuing, I think, what you sort of expect from Iowa in terms of like running the ball control, complementary football, that kind of stuff, but like an elevated form of it. Like they're going to throw the ball, I think, more explosively and more efficiently with Tim Lester than they certainly would have with Brian Ferentz. Tim Lester still runs the ball quite a bit. I think historically he's still run the ball more than he's thrown the ball, even though he has had good passing attacks and good receivers. And like you mentioned Sky Moore, they had D. Eskridge at Western Michigan, who I think Tim Lester inherited, but still like got good production out of him, and then he got drafted. They had Jayden Reed at Western Michigan, who was really good as a freshman before he transferred to Michigan State. And then they had Sky Moore. So that's like 3 receivers, if you want to give him credit for Jayden Reed, that were drafted out of Western Michigan during Tim Lester's time there. At least he had some part in. Iowa's had like 2 receivers drafted in like the last 25 years or something like that. Like they don't do that. And I think he can elevate them at that position. And I think it's just like an enhanced version of what they want to do. Like Kirk Ferentz was never going to take a major swing outside of his comfort zone and hire like a Ryan Grubb or hire some of the guys we're going to talk about as we go down this list of new offensive coordinators. There's comfort, I think, with what Tim Lester wants to do, but far more competency and his ability to do it, which I think makes a lot of sense for Iowa.
I think some things in the Iowa discussion have been merged, I think, incorrectly, at least from my standpoint. My only issue was hiring your unqualified kid. The idea of playing complementary football and trying to win low-scoring games with special teams and defense and not turning it over, great. That idea, I don't think you have to hire a guy who's going to come in and now you're going to try to score 45 points a game. I just think Brian Ferentz was like the 1,000th best person you could have gotten to run that offensive style. But Kirk Ferentz, they've won a lot of games, and I think they would win even more if their offense was at least good at what they were trying to do. They have a philosophy, then they were terrible at that philosophy because the person running the offense was unqualified. Tim Lester is qualified to do this. So then to stay in that idea, to stay in that with that plan, I think is fine. Yeah. And like if they have like the 60th best offense in the country instead of the 120th best offense in the country, they might make the playoff.
Yeah.
Like all good, man. Like don't lose track. Keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing was the nepotism that led to an unqualified person leading an inept offense. Yeah. So that problem's been solved.
Can you score 3 touchdowns? Can you score 3 touchdowns? And I think if you can, you're all right. You're Iowa. I
think they like the shirts at Iowa, like punt to win and that kind of thing. Can you score 3 touchdowns? ? It's a good Iowa shirt.
Yeah, I'd wear that shirt.
Let's do Kirk Campbell at Michigan. This promotion internally, this is an interesting one. He's 37, I think. We talked about how Sherrone Moore is not sure what he's going to do with the play calling. Kirk Campbell was an analyst at Michigan in 2022. And then this is similar to what happened at Ohio State with Zach Smith, where Zach Smith got in trouble. They fired him and they promoted like the internal analyst at that position. And it was Brian Hartline. And then in that situation, Ohio State was off to the races. This is Matt Weiss has something with his computer. He gets fired. They promote internally the analyst. He's becomes Michigan's quarterbacks coach for 2023, and now he's the offensive coordinator at Michigan. And otherwise, like, he was an analyst at Penn State from 2017 to 2019. He was the Old Dominion offensive coordinator for a couple years, but it's not a real long resume for Kirk Campbell. And as much as like maybe Michigan wants to keep things in-house and internal and keep the culture, like, he hasn't been there that long. So it's hard to hire an offensive coordinator. It's hard to hire a great offensive coordinator if you're not going to let him call plays. And Sherrone Moore doesn't exactly know what the plan is yet, but I don't know about this one.
Yeah, I think this is maybe a little bit of a signal that Sherrone Moore is going to continue to call plays. I think the first time he was asked about it in January, he said, like, I don't know, but probably not. And then he was asked about it subsequently, and he said, like, well, we'll get together and we'll talk about it and see what the best plan is, which is like already kind of a change in tone there, which again, I don't necessarily disagree with, for at least for the first year or so of Sherrone Moore's tenure. This kind of felt like to me, like, everyone's leaving me. We have to maintain some kind of continuity here. Like, Kirk Campbell, at least, is like, he knows the offense. He's been in it for a couple of years. I mean, that did a decent job, I guess, with the quarterbacks at Michigan in the 1 year that he was the position coach there. Why not promote him and try to foster some of that continuity? And I'll maintain play calling duties. And hopefully we get to a time where either like Kirk Campbell's ready to handle it and you hand it off to him, or you're more established as a head coach and the program is still humming. You go out and get a more established offensive coordinator who can take it off your plate.
But that's the feeling. It feels like you can't have Kirk Campbell call the plays this year. So that at the very least,
Correct.
if Sherrone Moore believes in Kirk Campbell and you work together and you build up to it so that he can take over in 25 or 26, great. But it doesn't feel like this is something you can do right now. And the hard part of this too is it feels like, Jim Harbaugh had his hands on the quarterbacks, man. That, like, again, that you were the position coach when your head coach played the position. And now you're going to be the offensive coordinator, and Sherrone Moore as a head coach is an offensive line guy. He's not a quarterbacks guy. So it's just, there's a lot changing at Michigan, and this is kind of a big step for Kirk Campbell.
Yeah, it is. We've talked a lot on our Ohio State show about Corey Dennis, and like a lot of that was like the relationship that he had to Urban Meyer that like kind of got him the job. But there was also like a sense of like, this is not the guy to be in that position, just in terms of like his background and resume. And like, there could be something similar here happening with Michigan.
All right. I'm curious if you like this one or not. It's Zach Lujan at Northwestern. He's 28. Do you like this hire?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, South Dakota State has had one of the better offenses in FCS the last couple of years. I think his first year as play caller, they won a national title, if I'm not mistaken.
So they're the two-time defending national champs at the FCS level. He was the South Dakota State offensive coordinator, and they've won the last two FCS titles.
Yeah, so I like it. I like it. I guess there's like familiarity there with David Braun, right? Where you're like, could you have gone outside of your comfort zone and gotten somebody better or more established, or kind of less of a big swing that you're taking here with upside? Maybe, but I also think that like Northwestern just like needs a real kick in the pants offensively, and this is an interesting way to go about it. And there's at least proof of concept at the FCS level, and I don't really see any reason why it couldn't carry over to Northwestern. So I would be excited about it, I think, if I'm a Northwestern fan.
This is a dice roll, but I like it.
Yeah.
So he's 28 years old. David Braun, the Northwestern head coach, had been the defensive coordinator at North Dakota State. And so Pat Fitzgerald was like, we need to do better defensively. I'm going to bring in this FCS level defensive coordinator. As soon as David Braun gets there, the program explodes. He becomes the head coach. So David Braun was never the defensive coordinator at Northwestern. He was the head coach. He did that last year with Pat Fitzgerald's staff. Mm-hmm. Season ends, he makes a lot of changes, including the coordinators on both sides. David Braun last year basically coordinated the defense himself, and he's not going to do that this year. But what happens here is he changes offensive coordinator, and Braun was at North Dakota State, and he hires a guy like he played against, which like that I like. Like, I'm the defensive coordinator. I have trouble stopping you. You're the South Dakota State offensive coordinator. Come work for me now. Lujan was the FCS coordinator of the year, according to Football Scoop or somebody, I think, right? He's 28. His career is he was the South Dakota State quarterback, and then he graduated and just became a coach.
Yeah.
And like within 5 years was calling the offense. So this is a meteoric rise. But at a place like Northwestern, right? This is a place for dice rolls. Like, go get this guy. And again, it's either going to be like, oh my God, you hired a kid. What are you doing? This exploded in your face. Or holy moly, this is one of the great young minds in college football, and he'll be at Northwestern for 3 years and then get hired by somebody trying to win a national title. But like, I like because it's different than like hiring somebody you worked with. It's hiring somebody you worked against, and maybe you're comfortable with because you're both in the Dakotas and you're kind of, but it's not that you necessarily were working down the hall from each other.
Correct.
But you respect the fact that I know what this guy's about, and I think he's a good coach.
Yeah, I like that. I like that thought process as well. And I think about, like, if you're put yourself in David Braun's shoes, right? Like you are unexpectedly the head coach of Northwestern now, right? But you did a really good job last year as the interim, like, to get that job. But like, you have a position that you weren't thinking you would have at this point. And I could understand if the inclination was like, I'm just going to go get like a veteran offensive coordinator who's not going to screw this up because I don't want to lose this job in 2 years. So I kind of respect the dice roll here. Like, take a swing on a guy who's been very productive at a lower level of football, and see if that can help you elevate the program even faster than people were expecting you to. So, maybe it won't work. I actually think it's going to work out quite well for them. And then Northwestern might be looking for a new offensive coordinator in a couple of years because Zach Lujan was like going to be the, I don't know, Georgia Bulldogs offensive coordinator or something.
Right. Dog mentality. Yeah. Or, let's keep them up north. Let's send them to Oregon. Jackrabbit mentality.
That's right.
Mike Denbrock, let's talk about him. New Notre Dame offensive coordinator. We're going from Zach Lujan, who's 28, to Mike Denbrock, who's 60. This is his third stint at Notre Dame. He is coming from LSU, where his 2 years at LSU was ninth in offense, and last year they were second in offense. LSU wanted to keep him, tried to get him to sign a 3-year extension. Texas A&M tried to hire him, and he said, no, I'll go back to Notre Dame for a third stint and work with Marcus Freeman, who he worked with at Cincinnati when Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati under Luke Fickell, and Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati under Luke Fickell. Is this like an A-plus hire in your mind? And this is a world where Notre Dame last year wound up with Jared Parker as our offensive coordinator after they tried to get some outside hires when Tommy Rees left for Alabama. Tommy Rees, by the way, that's a tough grind, man. He's the Notre Dame offensive coordinator. He gets hired to go be the Alabama offensive coordinator for 1 year. Saban retires, and now Tommy Rees is like the tight ends coach for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He didn't do a tremendous job in his coordinator roles. So like,
but it threw point taken. They made the playoff. It threw Notre Dame into disarray a little bit. The big thing last year was they tried to get Andy Ludwig from Utah. Notre Dame wouldn't pay the buyout reportedly, and that's why they wound up hiring internally. But now they make a big hire.
Yeah.
LSU wanted to keep him. Texas A&M wanted to steal him. Instead, he comes home to Notre Dame. This feels like this could be a huge difference maker, and maybe why Riley Leonard's tenure as a transfer quarterback at Notre Dame could be significantly more successful than Sam Hartman's tenure at Notre Dame as a transfer quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty exciting combination they have there with quarterback and coordinator. And maybe I'd think differently if Mike Denbrock just sort of like showed up at LSU, kind of got lightning in a bottle with Jaden Daniels, a quarterback, and had a couple of top 10 offenses and a Heisman Trophy winner, but like it wasn't really who he was. But like his offenses in Cincinnati were pretty good too.
Yeah.
And there was a build there too. I think it was like 61st, 60th in offensive efficiency, and then they were 36th, 27th. Yeah. So like there's a build there that I think shows you that he knows what he's doing outside of the environment where you have a lot of really explosive playmakers at a place like LSU. And and Notre Dame like needs to elevate its offense if it wants to be what Marcus Freeman expects it to be. Like I think they got a pretty good thing going there, on defense, and like took a step forward offensively last year. Found some more explosiveness with Sam Hartman, but still like not the efficiency combined with the explosiveness that I think you want there, and just like not dynamic on the outside with the receiver position. So if Mike Denbrock can unlock some of that and get the best out of Riley Leonard before Riley Leonard goes off to the NFL, then I think that makes sense for Marcus Freeman to make this decision here. So like, is it an A? Like I think I'd probably give it an A. I don't know if I give it quite an A plus, but I think I'd give it an A.
All right, so we went from 28 years old to 60 years old. Now we're going back to 31 years old. This is Cade Bell at Pitt. There's somebody that we know that loves Cade Bell. Like this is a guy, and I'm just making a comparison here because of the word Carolina links these two guys. Cade Bell was the offensive coordinator at Western Carolina for 3 years, and then got hired to be the Pitt offensive coordinator at age 31. Lincoln Riley was the offensive coordinator at Eastern Carolina for 5 years, and then hired to be the Oklahoma offensive coordinator at age 31. Pat Narduzzi said he was looking for energy and enthusiasm. Like he's acknowledging that I'm an older coach and like we need some juice. And like at the introductory press conference, he said like Cade Bell's bringing that. But also like I think people think Cade Bell might be pretty good at this. What do you think of this hire for Pitt?
I like Pat Narduzzi kind of zigging when everyone thought he was going to zag here with this hire, right? This is, I think, what Iowa fans were hoping Kirk Ferentz would do.
Yes.
And I like it. I like it for Pitt, which had probably the worst offense in the ACC last year. They're going to play with a lot of tempo. They're going to probably throw it a little more than Pat Narduzzi is comfortable with, and be a little more aggressive, and maybe play a little less ball control than Pat Narduzzi is comfortable with. But I think that's good for Pat Narduzzi, who's been kind of lost both at quarterback and coordinator for the last couple of years. And they have Western Carolina's leading rusher and leading receiver are also going to Pitt with Cade Bell, which I find interesting.
They love Cade Bell.
Yeah, got to figure out the quarterback piece, which we've talked about.
Eli Holstein, baby, it's all good.
Yeah, I think you could be right. So
Alabama,
I love it. Again, it's kind of a dice roll here too. I think maybe a little less so because Pat Narduzzi is a little more established, obviously, than David Braun is at Northwestern. But I think it's what Pitt needs. Like Pitt needs to seriously evolve on offense, and I think Cade Bell will get them there.
All right, Washington, Brennan Carroll, again, coming with Jedd Fisch from Arizona. Brennan Carroll, like a lot of his career, is working for his dad. 14 years of his career is working for his dad, Pete Carroll, either at USC or with the Seahawks. He is 44 years old. He's not a kid. But he did work with Jedd Fisch. He went and was the tight ends coach and recruiting coordinator at Miami, Florida for a couple of years, and worked with Jedd Fisch there. And then when Jedd Fisch got the Arizona job, he was like, I think this guy was good when I worked with him before, and he hired him to Arizona. The 3 years at Arizona, and Jedd Fisch is an offensive coach. Brennan Carroll, the 3 years at Arizona, he and Jedd Fisch, Arizona's offense went from 97th in year one to 34th to 12th last year. Mm-hmm. And that's with working in Noah Fafita as a new quarterback, and he was awesome. He comes, he's coming with his guy, but Washington was as dynamic and exciting and as successful as any offense in the country last season. And they lose Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb and Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan and everybody who made that possible. But this is a pretty good recovery if you want Washington to be a high-level offense.
Yeah, I think so. Jedd Fisch is going to call the plays still, which is what he did at Arizona when Brennan Carroll was his coordinator there. Brennan Carroll's he's an offensive line coach, which I find interesting. I don't think you see a ton of offensive line coaches who are also coordinators, and
Sherrone Moore, but
it seems even more rare that like you have that combination and then that guy's also empowered to call plays. I think coaching offensive line, coordinating the offense, and calling plays is like a tough ask of anybody. Brennan Carroll doesn't have to do that. He's the coordinator. He'll help with meetings. He'll help set the plan, but he's not calling the plays on Saturday. And I actually think he's a pretty good offensive line coach. Like Arizona has some good offensive line play. I think they're going to have a tackle who's going to probably go like in the second round this year. So it's good. I think. As long as Jedd Fisch is calling the plays there, like I don't want to make too much of it, but it's nice to have continuity, I guess, for Jedd Fisch, like going up to Washington in a new environment and knowing that he has a coordinator that he can trust.
And let's talk Chip Kelly at Ohio State. So Brian Hartline was the offensive coordinator last year for the Buckeyes, but Ryan Day was still calling the plays. Chip Kelly is coming in to call the plays because Ryan Day is giving that up. Bill O'Brien was Ohio State's offensive coordinator in that job for 3 weeks before he took the Boston College job. How do you think this works out in the end for Ohio State, that Ryan Day makes this decision, Bill O'Brien leaves, and now it's Chip Kelly?
I think it works out really well for Ohio State. I don't know that you could ask for anything better. I kind of like the fit of Chip Kelly a little more than Bill O'Brien for what I think Ohio State needs offensively. And certainly you don't You don't lose anything in the play calling chops with Chip Kelly compared to Bill O'Brien. And I think Chip Kelly probably gives you a little more creativity, can maybe elevate Ryan Day's run game a little more. The question, I guess, is like the quarterback coaching piece of this.
Yeah.
Because Bill O'Brien was going to coach quarterbacks, and he's got a really strong record of coaching quarterbacks. Chip Kelly has coached quarterbacks, and he's going to coach quarterbacks at Ohio State, but not quite the same resume coaching that position as Bill O'Brien. And I wonder, does Ryan Day stay a little more involved with that? Like, do you have to get a GA or an analyst involved with that a little more? Like, I don't know that part of it interesting, but in terms of like taking the play calling burden off of Ryan Day, I think this is just as good and possibly better than what Ohio State would have had with Bill O'Brien.
And then for anybody who doesn't know it, Chip Kelly is Ryan Day's mentor. They went to the same high school in Manchester, New Hampshire. Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator at the University of New Hampshire, who went and recruited Ryan Day as a quarterback and then coached Ryan Day. And then Chip Kelly, when he went to the NFL with the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers, Ryan Day was his quarterback's coach. And they are very tight. Like Ryan, he's his mentor. Chip Kelly helped Ryan Day become who he is as a coach. And so this is always interesting of like, now the mentee is in charge and the mentor is here, but like Chip Kelly has made this decision. Again, like Chip Kelly, I don't think it's like, oh, Chip Kelly, could he have fit the model that I was espousing earlier with Schiano and Bill O'Brien and Mike Loxley and Pat Narduzzi at UCLA, where it's like, you know what? And I think Chip Kelly was just like, I don't want to be in charge anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to get a better head coaching job than UCLA at this point. So like, I don't want the hassle. I love ball. I love offense. Let me go call plays for my friend and let him deal with all the stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think from that standpoint, but again, he is filling the spot of Corey Dennis, who had never been a full-time assistant coach at any level of college football before he became the quarterback's coach at Ohio State. Chip Kelly is Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly is like one of the 10 best offensive minds in the modern era of college football and has been a head coach at 4 different places. So like, again, the elevation here, like Tim Lester compared to Brian Ferentz is a pretty big gap. Chip Kelly to Corey Dennis is like from here to the moon.
It is. No, it is. And that would have been the case of Bill O'Brien too.
Yes.
If they would have just been able to keep him, which is like, I don't know, in my opinion, been a long time coming for Ohio State. And it's not that their quarterback play has been bad. It's been quite good. It's just that like Ryan Day shouldn't have to do it.
Right.
So now he doesn't have to, now that they've made the decision to put Chip Kelly in that spot.
Okay. Are there any offensive coordinators that we did not sort of zero in on that you wanted to talk about?
Maybe the one was, we talked a little bit about at the time that they hired him, like Andy Koltonicki at Penn State, I think is an interesting one that like a lot of creativity, a lot of explosiveness, all of which Penn State desperately needs. I think it'll be interesting to see just how much James Franklin empowers Andy Koltonicki to like kind of get in the lab and draw out some cool stuff. But you look at his background at Kansas and Buffalo, there's no shortage of ways that I think that he could elevate Penn State's offense and really have some fun with it with the playmakers they have there and the 2 quarterbacks that Penn State has. I think all of that is really interesting. I'm just very curious to see how far James Franklin is willing to let him take it.
You sent me a video of Andy Koltonicki running a play with 2 quarterbacks on the field together, because that's my dream. Like, you're just teasing me? What are we going to see Drew Aller and Bo Prabula together? Like, what? Please.
I think so. Yeah. He used Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean a couple of times in different ways together. And like, you have them, like, why not use them? Right. So, and Penn State has 2 quarterbacks that it thinks can play. Prabula more of a runner and Aller more of a pocket passer, but they're still there's skill sets there that can work at the Power 5 level. So why not use both of them? And I think Koltonicki will, and he'll want to, and we'll see if James Franklin lets him, I guess.
Is this with what Penn State has been building to and with what Penn State wants to be? Penn State wants to be a playoff team in the 12-team playoff. Is this maybe even the most important offensive coordinator hire? That like what Andy Koltonicki, he's been successful. They fired the offensive coordinator during the season a year ago because it wasn't getting it done. And now you have a 3rd-year quarterback starting for his 2nd year in Drew Aller, 2 really good running backs. Like there's potential here. with Penn State.
Mhm.
Andy Kotelnicki's job to elevate this offense in a way that can make Penn State a playoff team. Does he have the most important coordinator job in the North?
Yeah, I think you can make that argument. I think I might agree with it. James Franklin at his time at Penn State has, I think, more often than not, and probably almost every year, had a championship caliber defense,
Yeah.
a playoff caliber defense, and he's like, and at times has had a good like Joe Moorhead was a really good offensive coordinator hire, but he's missed a couple of times too. And I don't think he's missed here with Andy Kotelnicki as long as he kind of lets him run the show and is kind of hands off with it. But I do think he has the highest stakes, I think, because I think everyone in Happy Valley is like wanting to see Penn State be a consistent playoff participant in a 12-team world. And I think we both believe that they can and probably will be, but there's even a step beyond that too, which is like not merely showing up, but like being competitive once you're there. And I think the way that Penn State does it is by taking steps forward offensively. And I think Andy Kotelnicki can get them there.
All right. That's 13 new offensive coordinators for our 26 Northern teams. When we come back, we'll dive into the 11 new defensive coordinators. That's next on Kings of the North. Continuing the Northern coaching carousel hill here on Kings of the North, 11 new defensive coordinators. So let's run through where those changes have been made. Again, we're talking about, 6 schools that have new head coaches. So we have question marks for Boston College because that hire has not been made, and Bill O'Brien's still assembling that staff. Cincinnati, Tyson Veidt from Iowa State is the new hire there. Colorado, it's Robert Livingston as the new defensive coordinator coming from the Cincinnati Bengals. Indiana, Bryant Haynes, the new defensive coordinator on Curt Cignetti's staff. Michigan gets Wink Martindale from the NFL to come take over there. Michigan State, it's Joe Rossi that Jonathan Smith was able to hire away from Minnesota. Other new defensive coordinators. So Corey Heatherman then takes over at Minnesota after Rossi left. Northwestern, Tim McGarrigle gets promoted to defensive coordinator because, again, David Braun in year 2 at Northwestern is not going to call the defensive signals anymore. Penn State gets former Indiana coach Tom Allen as the new defensive coordinator. Syracuse gets Elijah Robinson up from Texas A&M. And Washington, Steve Belichick, the son of Bill Belichick. Now that the dad retired, he needs to get a job on his own, and he lands as the defensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies. Let's talk about Colorado off the bat here, Bill, because they were not very good defensively last year in Deion Sanders' first year. He's revamping everything, right? A lot of new places, new offensive line coach as well. But this hire, Robert Livingston, is a guy who has been with the Cincinnati Bengals for a long time. I think he's with their safeties coach for their secondary coach like the last 8 years. And he's been called a Lou Anarumo disciple. And Anarumo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. He's somebody that's often on head coaching lists. The safety play with the Bengals, Jesse Bates and Von Bell, like they've run some really good safeties through there. I think Deion Sanders has expressed that he's interested in having coaches on his staff with NFL experience. This feels like a really good hire. That like he's a position coach under a really good defensive coordinator in the NFL where like he's not going to get the chance to coordinate there. So maybe he's never coordinated before, but man, Livingston has really learned a lot about defense for the past decade. What do you think of this hire?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It feels similar to me like the kind of the swing that Ryan Day took when he hired Jeff Hafley in 2019, like NFL position coach who had just been sort of like marinating in a really good scheme. And like Jeff Hafley was kind of in that Seattle Seahawks kind of tree with the 49ers as well. Like they ran the same defense. And this is like not the same defense, but I think a similar idea here. Certainly like not a coach I knew a whole lot about before Deion Sanders decided to make him the defensive coordinator. But, NFL background, successful system, learning from a really good coordinator, and his position group seemed to shine in Cincinnati too. Like that checks a lot of boxes for me. He's not been in college for a while, right? He has college in his background, but has not been in college since 2011 when he was at Vanderbilt. So like, the game has changed quite a bit since the last time that Robert Livingston was in college, and I mean that more so from a recruiting standpoint. But that's what Deion's there for, to handle a lot of that. Yeah. So if this is just a guy that can get Colorado sound and complex for offenses, at least on defense, then I like the hire.
The pitch of the hire makes sense, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's a lot of it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. So just as the thought process that Deion Sanders employed to lead to this hire, I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think this is another great hire. Let's go to Cincinnati. This is Tyson Veidt, who comes from Iowa State, where he had been the linebackers coach. And again, this is another situation where at Iowa State, John Haycock has been the defensive coordinator for Matt Campbell for like a decade plus, right? He's an excellent defensive coordinator, and he's not really going anywhere. So if you're at Iowa State and Tyson Veidt is on this Matt Campbell tree, like no matter how good you are, there's not really a spot for you to move up. So for Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati to go take that guy, who, by the way, is from Ohio, and when Scott Satterfield is introducing him, he starts off with like, A, he knows the Big 12 because he's been at Iowa State and Cincinnati's new to the Big 12, and B, he's from Ohio, and C, by the way, it seems like he's a really good coach. Like this feels like a great hire by Cincinnati, even though this guy has not been a coordinator before. He feels more than ready to be a coordinator at a place like Cincinnati.
Yeah, he's not had a coordinator title since 2007 at St. Vincent, which is a Division III college in Pennsylvania. So in that way, again, it's like a little bit of a swing, but it's similar thought process to what we just talked about, right? It's like a guy who's just been in a really good system for a long time, who seems to have done a really good job with his position group and is kind of ready to be elevated. The thing that'll be interesting at Cincinnati is like whether or not they have the personnel, I guess, to like immediately jump in to that 3-3-5 that Haycock has been running at Iowa State forever, that Veidt has, presumably wants to run when he runs his own defense. So maybe there needs to be some kind of blend of ideas there before the personnel quite matches what Veidt wants to run. But I like the thought process, even if it is a little bit of a gamble on a guy who's not called his own defense at this level before. I think finding a guy in a good system to come do it at Cincinnati, who again is familiar with the Big 12, and that defense works in the Big 12 too. Like everyone in the Big 12 runs it, or a lot of the Big 12 runs it. So I like it. I think again, it's not an obvious hire for a place like Cincinnati, but I also think it's like the kind of swing that a place like Cincinnati needs to take sometimes.
Yeah, really good, really good. Michigan and Wink Martindale. Let's talk about this. Wink Martindale, 60 years old, hasn't been in college, I think, since Western Kentucky in 2003.
That's right.
So this is the continuation of the Harbaughs picking apples off each other's trees.
Yep.
Because Wink Martindale had been with John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens for nearly a decade. He was the linebackers coach from 2012 to 2017. From 2018 to 2021, he's the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. John Harbaugh decides we need a change after the 21 season, and he takes Mike Macdonald from his brother Jim at Michigan and makes him the defensive coordinator. But Mike Macdonald, when he got hired at Michigan, had been with the Ravens, right? So like it's this back and forth. And then, so the bottom line of this is Wink Martindale is now hired by Sherrone Moore at Michigan after Jim Harbaugh leaves. And while Wink Martindale never worked for Jim Harbaugh, he worked for John Harbaugh for nearly 10 years. And there obviously was communication there. And so even though, they parted ways, whatever. And then he was the Giants coordinator. It's not like he couldn't get a job. He was the New York Giants defensive coordinator the last 2 years. So this is a long-time NFL defensive coordinator that I'm sure John Harbaugh gave his stamp of approval for because they still want Michigan to be good. So unlike promoting Kirk Campbell as the offensive coordinator, it's not an internal hire at Michigan, but it's a family hire.
Yeah.
So, but the guy's been around the NFL for 20 years at a high level. Like, do you like this hire or not?
I like the idea of maintaining schematically what Michigan has done the last couple of years, because it's worked incredibly well, both under Jesse Minter and under Mike Macdonald, which is why both those guys are back in the NFL. Could you have gotten somebody different to do that? Perhaps. Like, I don't know. Was there a defensive position coach in Baltimore who you could have hired to like make a coordinator for the first time? I think maybe I would have liked that a little more. Because like Wink Martindale is not going to go out there and find you dudes to put in this defense. He's just going to coach the defense. And like he did so effectively in the NFL, and I think he can probably do so effectively in college. It's different, like communicating it to 18-year-olds than it is to communicating it to NFL veterans. And Mike Macdonald and Jesse Minter did a really good job of getting those guys to play incredibly well in a great defensive system. I don't know that I believe fully that Wink Martindale can do the same. I understand why Sherrone Moore wanted to maintain that continuity and scheme, because I would have too. I think maybe I would have just pounded the pavement a little more to maybe find somebody with a different profile who maybe could have done the same thing rather than a 60-year-old non-recruiter who's not been in college football for 20 years.
Does it make sense for Sherrone Moore to just get like a veteran in the building, to have a coach who's been around a little bit? This reminds me a little bit of when Ryan Day in his first year hired Greg Madison, right? Did he hire Madison or did Urban?
He hired Madison and Halfley, and Madison was just sort of like the adult in the room who can kind of like get them organized. So
Greg Madison, who had been with the Ravens at one point, but was coming from Michigan, but was a veteran coach. And again, is a coach like that. Not that older coaches can't recruit, but is that why he's there? No, but it's just for a young, new head coach who's never been a head coach before at any level to have a guy in the building who's been around a little bit. And so I think from this standpoint, and again, like, is Wink Martindale going to be the defensive coordinator for the next 10 years at Michigan? I get it as sort of a veteran on deck for a couple years as Sherrone Moore gets rolling here. I think it makes sense. But the issue is he's also running the defense. So like, that's like, is the defense going to be good enough? And the game-changing move that Jim Harbaugh made was getting rid of Don Brown to bring in Mike Macdonald as defensive coordinator several years ago. And again, we don't just want to lump old guys and young guys, and that's not fair. But like, you've got to be careful here. But also, we're acknowledging this guy has been an NFL defensive coordinator for like the last 6 years, and now he's a college defensive coordinator. So there's a bunch of NFL guys. Everybody thinks college football is dead, and there's a lot of NFL guys coming to college football. Like, is the sport okay? Are we okay?
I think the sport is just fine. Yeah. Okay. Well, not just fine. It has to still figure out, but it's not dead.
Do you want to write the headline, "Why the hire of Wink Martindale proves that college football is just fine"?
Yeah, or that the NFL is broken. Yeah, people are abandoning ship.
Why Wink Martindale and Steve Belichick leaving proves the NFL is in a death spiral.
Yeah, I'd write that story. This could work out just fine. I actually think it's going to be a case where like Wink Martindale goes to Michigan for a couple of years. I think Sherrone Moore obviously hopes he does a good job, and then he just starts picking people off from Mike Macdonald's Seahawks staff or Jesse Minter's or LA Chargers defensive staff when he has to make a
Yeah, the Harbaugh universe is growing, man. Yeah. To have a world where 3 of the 32 teams in the NFL are run by Harbaughs or Harbaugh disciples, which is what Mike Macdonald is in both directions. And then Jesse Minter might be a head coach in the NFL in a couple years too, if you're not careful. Like, plus the defending national champs are run by somebody in the Harbaugh tree. That Harbaugh, Jack Harbaugh, that's just like, he's just like sitting back. He's just like the Kennedys, man. Like, it's like the plan is coming to fruition. We got him everywhere. So that's what happens when you win. All right. So I think it's interesting to keep your eye on. Again, like, I wouldn't like call this a home run, but I get it. And I think I get it, but I'm curious to see how it works too. Let's talk about Elijah Robinson at Syracuse. This guy is like another up and comer, not yet 40 years old, coming from Texas A&M, where he actually was an interim head coach after Jimbo Fisher got fired. New Jersey roots, just like Fran Brown, the Syracuse head coach. They've known each other forever, played at Penn State, right? And then wound up working with Matt Rule. So after he finished his playing career at Penn State, worked at Penn State, then worked under Matt Rule at Temple and Baylor, now at A&M. Like, this is a great profile of a young coach. Had a co-DC title at Texas A&M. When Fran Brown hired him at Syracuse, he said, "I think we got the best defensive coordinator in the country." Like, I think this is another hire that has a chance to be like tremendous. It is northern roots with some southern exposure, who is now motivated to bring. There are some parts of the Southern football that are good.
Yeah,
there are more parts of Northern football that are good, but you bring the best of Southern football north with your Northern roots and let it rip.
Yeah, I think it's good to understand how the sport works kind of all over the place, and then bring that to the spot where you're ready to be a head coach, like Fran Brown did, and Elijah Robinson. I'm sure well. It is pretty crazy to me as like someone who grew up in Philadelphia, that like Camden, New Jersey, which is like kind of a speck on the map,
boom,
has produced like the head coach and defensive coordinator at Syracuse. It's not a particularly large metropolitan area there, just across the river from Philadelphia. But it's cool. Like Elijah Robinson has been on the rise. He had a co-DC title, I think, at A&M. I don't know exactly what the dynamic was there, but it has felt like for a couple of years that he has been building toward kind of doing his own thing. And I don't know, like, do we know what the dynamic's going to be at Syracuse? Like, is Elijah Robinson going to call it? Is Fran Brown going to call it? But like, even they can figure that out. But it's like, a guy in Fran Brown who, and it's not necessarily about being in Georgia. It's about like being in like the Nick Saban defense, basically, as a defensive backs coach. So like, he got that on the back end, and he got Elijah Robinson kind of coordinating the front end, who's been a really good defensive line coach. And by the way, both of them are great recruiters. I could see this working tremendously well for Syracuse.
Yeah. The relationships that in their time, that to have recruiting relationships in Georgia, in Texas, like all those players that were being recruited there. I mean, Elijah Robinson was winning like awards for like top recruiter. And, when Texas A&M was doing all this stuff with NIL or whatever, but getting the #1 recruiting class in the country, like Elijah Robinson was right in the middle of that. And so now he's bringing that to Syracuse, like that kind of thing where you can go there and say, okay, high schools in the South, maybe, all right, Syracuse is not going to get the kid that has offers from Texas and Bama and Georgia. But who's the next kid you have? Who's the kid that like is underrated? And you can win a lot of games with those kind of kids. And hey, and if you have those relationships with coaches, and they have multiple people on the staff that have built those relationships, man, I just think I'm just super. I can't wait to watch Syracuse football the next couple of years.
Yeah,
I think it has a chance to really be something.
I think so too.
Steve Belichick's dad retired,
Mm-hmm.
so he needed a job.
What was his name? Did he do anything noteworthy?
I think he's in the Dun Kings. Is that right?
Yeah, he should. That would have been funny if he was in that commercial. That would have been hilarious.
He's a rapper. So Steve Belichick, son of Bill, is 36. This is his resume. Rutgers lacrosse player, worked for his dad.
You skipped over him being a long snapper for Rutgers.
I skipped. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to underplay his Rutgers football experience. Rutgers lacrosse player / long snapper, worked for his dad. He was a coaching assistant with the Patriots and then became like the full-time safeties coach when he was not yet 30, as someone who barely played college football. I'm sure it went over great. I'm sure it was great. I'm sure the millionaires were like, yeah, great. But now he got a job. So Jedd Fisch worked in New England for a little bit. So like no Steve Belichick from that. So this is the Brian Ferentz dream. Like, my dad retired and I got a job on my own. It's my friend, but I'm still on my own. It's not related. So I'm super curious. I do think, I have no reason to know this. Is Steve Belichick more qualified than Brian Ferentz? I don't know. Like the Iowa, and by the way, the Ferentzes and the Belichicks are all buddies because they love hiring their kids. So, curious. Do we have any idea of whether we think? And by the way, Steve Belichick was working for the Patriots defense when his dad is the defensive head coach. Like, I don't think we have any idea if Steve Belichick's going to be good, but we'll see.
He has allegedly been calling the plays for the Patriots defense, I believe since 2019 after Brian Flores left. It's kind of weird. I was looking through this. The Patriots have not had someone with a defensive coordinator title since Matt Patricia in 2017. And they were just kind of like passing play calling duties around position coaches, but that eventually fell to Steve Belichick for the last couple of years. Now, Gerard Mayo, the new Patriots coach, was around for some of that and had a front row seat to Steve Belichick doing it. and apparently wasn't particularly impressed with it, or else maybe he could have retained him.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. So I don't know what to make of this either. I have no idea whether or not Steve Belichick can be a good coordinator in an environment where his dad is not the de facto defensive coordinator. But it's an interesting name, and like it gives him a little bit of NFL cachet, as we talked about earlier. So we'll see, I guess.
I looked it up. Since Steve Belichick may or may not have taken over defensive play calling duties, the Patriots have won 5 straight Super Bowls. I looked that up. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. They haven't won a playoff game. Sorry. That would be, they won 4 games this year. So, Mayo. Hey, man, Mayo. What do you got for me? Hey, Mayo. Gerard, Mayo.
Yeah.
New
it
phone.
Is. This
Who's
has.
this?
Yeah, this has nothing to do with this conversation, by the way, but I was just like watching an interview with Gerard Mayo. What a change for the Patriots media group.
Oh,
You can talk to that guy now instead of Bill Belichick. Yeah. They're not going to know what to do with themselves. The guy's actually going to answer questions like a human being.
Yeah. Do we know how old Gerard Mayo's kids are? Let's see. When Gerard Mayo is 37. Let's see. I don't see anything about his family, but if he's 37, let's see.
He has 3 daughters and a son.
They're probably all in elementary school. I doubt any of them will be calling plays for the Patriots, at least not right away.
Not yet.
So I mean, but again, now we're gonna find out. So we're gonna find out what Steve Belichick can do when he's not working for his dad. So, is there anybody else from a defensive coordinator standpoint in the North that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
I think we've glanced over both or talked about both of these guys, but like I thought Joe Rossi kind of getting poached from Minnesota to Michigan State was interesting. Like Minnesota's defense was not particularly good this past season, but they have been a couple of years under Joe Rossi. Like Minnesota had some pretty good draft production from its defense when Joe Rossi was there. So I liked that hire. And I also, James Franklin going to get Tom Allen to be his defensive coordinator. I think he's really good. I don't love Tom Allen as a head coach. I love Tom Allen as a defensive coordinator. And I think there's ideological continuity, at least from Manny Diaz to Tom Allen, in terms of wanting to be aggressive. Maybe it's not a 1-for-1 scheme fit, but enough of a fit that I don't think there's much of a transition there. And I expect Penn State's defense to continue to be very good with Tom Allen as its coordinator. So those were the 2 that we did not talk about that kind of stuck out to me.
When you think about Tom Allen, like the alternate universe again, where Kevin Wilson, nothing ever happens, and he just stays the head coach at Indiana for a while, and Tom Allen is just his really good defensive coordinator. That, like, Jim Knowles was a huge hire for Ohio State. Got $2 million a year when Ohio State took him from Oklahoma State to be the defensive coordinator. Like, Tom Allen was on the Jim Knowles path, and then like there was a head coach opening at his school, and he became the head coach. And then he was like okay for a couple years, and then it was like, oh, he's not really a head coach. But I don't know that anybody's ever doubted Tom Allen as a defensive coordinator, have they? And so then the result is like, oh, it's hard with the coordinators. You're so good as a coordinator that you have the opportunity to become a below average head coach. But then when you go back to being a coordinator, remember how good that person was as a coordinator to get that opportunity. Tom Allen as a defensive coordinator, like Tom Allen might be one of the 10 best defensive coordinators in college football, right?
Yeah, no, I think he could be for sure. And like he gets to be like just the head coach of half the team now, which is like maybe that's more his speed. So I think it could work out really well for both of them. And I don't know, could it work out so well that like someone else takes a swing at Tom Allen as a head coach? I don't know. Maybe he could be like a G5 head coach somewhere. Maybe that's more of a fit than a place like Indiana ended up being for him. But until that happens, I think Penn State's going to have a really good defensive coordinator.
The Michigan situation turned around when Jim Harbaugh revamped his staff after the 2020 season.
Mm-hmm.
Could Tom Allen and Andy Kotelnicki as 2 new coordinators for James Franklin, Kotelnicki taking over because the previous guy was fired, Allen taking over because the previous guy, Manny Diaz, was good and left after 2 years to get another head coaching job at Duke. Could these 2 moves have a similar effect to be like, this was the moment when Penn State took a leap because they got their staff improved that much?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember what all Jim Harbaugh changed. Like, obviously he changed his coordinators and like kind of backed off the offense. Like that to me is the key here for James Franklin. Like James Franklin hasn't called plays, but I think he has had ideas of how he wants his offense to run that have not always meshed with his coordinators and like gotten in the way of his coordinators maximizing their offenses. So if he can kind of get over that hurdle, then I think, yes, this could play out very similarly for Penn State. Not that they're going to go win a national championship, but yeah, like take a step forward for sure.
Okay. That is 6 new head coaches, 13 new offensive coordinators, and 11 new defensive coordinators in our 26 Northern college football teams. You know, we weren't given grades. I don't know. I'm more interested in having interesting discussions here. There's so much. There's one thing in particular that like constantly is like ranking things with no knowledge, and it gets people's attention, but it's nothing to me. So like sometimes like who has the best this when you're throwing darts? I don't know what the appeal of that is. I would rather attempt to have interesting conversations and maybe inform our Northern audience that knows their own team, but doesn't know everything about all the other Northern teams. Now you know that Northwestern's offensive coordinator is a 28-year-old from South Dakota State. And now you're reminded that Notre Dame's new offensive coordinator got poached from LSU, where they wanted to give him a 3-year extension. And you know that Penn State has 2 new coordinators. And you know that Washington's 2 coordinators are sons of NFL legends. And you know that the Texas A&M defense, co-defensive coordinator left to come to Syracuse. Like, I just want to have interesting conversations without doing stupid rankings that maybe we don't know everything about everybody either.
Yeah, I just don't even know how you do it. Like, how do you rank Cade Bell compared to Zach Lujan compared to Tim Lester? Like, I have no idea, right? But maybe after a year, we can go back and like look at this cycle and say, like, man, these guys really nailed it, or boy, this was an F. Like, I think we can do that then. But yeah, at the outset, it just feels like a kind of a worthless exercise. Where otherwise, like, I think the way we went about it, which is like trying to get a little bit of background on who these guys are, where they came from, what they hope to be, I think is a more interesting conversation right now.
So then on Thursday, we will come back and we will rank the best haircuts among Northern football coaches, 1 through 20.
We can do that. We have that information. That's what's on hand. We don't need to wait and see.
And we have hair.
And
various stages of hair.
Yeah.
We've had hair. We understand hair. We're
used to have
hair.
Yeah.
What we're actually going to do on Thursday is at least one of the online sports books has put out over/under win totals for everybody in college football. So we're not going to run through all 26 for our Northern teams, but we're going to pick our favorite ones, our favorite overs and unders, like the 5 over/under bets in the North that we would make right now, and maybe dip into the South for just a little bit. There's a lot of other ideas that we have. There's a lot more that we're going to dive into this offseason on Kings of the North. Again, if you've listened and watched this far, you're a diehard, and you probably know that we're getting to 5 days a week before the start of the 2024 college football season. Right now, we're still in 2 days a week. We're still planning. We're still growing. We're still shooting for the stars, man. Just shooting.
That's right.
Just shooting for the stars. So thanks to everybody who's part of that, whether you just joined us, whether you've been here from the jump. Thanks, of course, to our great producer, Mike Rostowski, who makes us look good and sound good. Love the look of the bottom things and the boxes, and we have all the logos and stuff. It's snazzy. But mostly thanks to you guys for being here. So he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.